At 6:14 on a Wednesday morning in the Taiwan Strait, the officer of the deck aboard USS Antietam was doing what officers of the deck do in the strait at 6:14 on a Wednesday: managing traffic, drinking coffee that had been good at 5 a.m. and was now something else entirely, and watching the radar scope with the methodical attention of someone who has made this transit before and expects it to be unremarkable. The shipping lanes through the strait carry somewhere between 200 and 250 vessels on any given day. The radar picture at 6:14 looked like a busy commuter highway rendered in green light, orderly, dense, predictable, and entirely uninteresting to anyone who had seen it before. The Antietam was on a standard freedom of navigation transit, course 12 degrees, speed 14 knots, position approximately 62 nautical miles southwest of the centerline, standard posture, standard track, standard mooring. The officer of the deck had filed the route plan the previous evening and had not expected to update it. At 6:17, the AN/SPY-1B radar returned a contact that required updating the route plan. Bearing 337, range 49 nautical miles, speed 29 knots, heading 158 degrees. The contact's radar cross-section was large, substantially larger than the merchant traffic around it, which averaged somewhere between 3,000 and 8,000 gross tons and moved at between 12 and 18 knots. This contact displaced, by the AN/SPY-1B's cross-section analysis, something in the range of 12 to 13,000 tons, and it was moving at 29 knots, which is not a speed that container vessels achieve in the Taiwan Strait and is specifically a speed associated with a particular class of surface combatant. The electronic warfare suite classified the contact within 8 seconds. Type 55, the plan's most capable surface combatant, the ship that China built when it decided it wanted a warship comparable to a U.S. Ticonderoga cruiser and was willing to spend what that required. The contact's designation in the threat library came back alongside its Type 346B AESA radar emissions, a system so capable that when the first Type 055 entered service, it generated a sustained discussion in naval analyst circles about whether the U.S. Navy's understanding of Chinese surface warfare capability required comprehensive revision. It did. The Type 055 earned that discussion. The officer of the deck picked up the intercom. He reported the contact in the flat, professional tone that experienced bridge officers use for contacts that are significant without being immediately dangerous. The tactical action officer was at the console within 40 seconds. The commanding officer was notified within 90 seconds. The coffee on the bridge remained where it was, growing no warmer, receiving no additional attention for the next several minutes. The planned commanding officer aboard the Type 055 had been planning this transit for 3 days. The Antietam's passage schedule, not a secret, given that freedom of navigation operations are conducted deliberately and notoriously, had been tracked through standard maritime intelligence channels. The Type 055 had been positioned north of the Strait's centerline specifically to intercept the Antietam, at a point where the shipping traffic would be dense enough to complicate the American ship's maneuvering options, while the planned warship demonstrated that Chinese naval forces could and would contest the transit. The plan was not unreasonable. A 12,000-ton warship at 29 knots closing on a 10,000-ton cruiser in a heavily trafficked strait does create a geometry that requires attention. The Antietam's commanding officer would have to choose between holding course and accepting a close approach, adjusting speed to change the intercept geometry, or initiating a course change that could be characterized as a response to plan pressure. All three options had implications. The plan commander had modeled all three and assessed that any choice the Antietam made would serve Beijing's demonstration objective. This analysis was correct in its tactical framing and incomplete in one significant respect. The plan commander had modeled the Antietam's response options. He had not modeled what the Antietam's collection systems would do with 49 nautical miles of unimpeded Type 3 46B radar emission before the ships reached closest point of approach. The AN/SLQ-32V 3 electronic warfare suite is the Ticonderoga-class's primary electronic intelligence and warning system. At 49 nautical miles, with the Type 3 46B operating in its standard search configuration, the geometry was nearly ideal for collection. The Type 3 46B is an active electronically scanned array, a sophisticated radar that represents the current state of Chinese naval radar engineering. It is capable, modern, and produces emissions that the U.S. intelligence community studies with the serious attention that capable, modern systems deserve. Previous collection had been achieved primarily from satellite passes and from standoff geometry aircraft missions, both of which produce useful but geometrically limited data. Direct collection from a surface ship at closing range across the full sequence of mode transitions from search through track is a different and considerably richer product. By 0632, 15 minutes after first detection, the SLQ-32 had logged 43 separate emission events from the Type 3 46B. Transitions between scan modes, power variations associated with specific track functions, and 2 brief activations of what the threat library flagged as a targeting mode waveform. The targeting mode activations lasted 4 seconds each. They were logged. They were tagged priority. They were transmitted via link 16 to 7th Fleet and to every U.S. asset within data link range before the Type 055 had crossed 35 nautical miles. The intelligence warfare officer had been at his console since 6:20. By 6:35, he had produced a preliminary emission summary that his supervisor described upon reading it as the most productive 15 minutes of passive radar collection on a Type 055 that Pacific Fleet EW had recorded to date. The intelligence warfare officer accepted this assessment with the measured modesty of a professional who has learned not to express enthusiasm in official documentation, and the poorly concealed satisfaction of a professional who is, in fact, extremely enthusiastic about what his system has collected. Quote, 0. He asked the tactical action officer. Quote, 1 quote, the TAO said. The intelligence warfare officer nodded. Quote, 2 quote, he said. He went back to his console. He had 42 minutes of geometry left. He intended to use all of them. Here is the vulnerability window, stated plainly, because every story on this channel earns its tension honestly. The Taiwan Strait at 6:14 on a Wednesday carries between 200 and 250 vessels. The Antietam at 14 knots in the southbound shipping lane was constrained by traffic on both sides and ahead. A 40,000-ton bulk carrier 4 nautical miles ahead on the same course, 2 container vessels closing from the northwest in the northbound lane, and the specific geometry of the Strait's traffic separation scheme that limits course deviation options to maneuvers that must account for all of the above simultaneously. The Antietam is a Ticonderoga-class cruiser with full maneuvering capability. But full maneuvering capability in dense traffic means something different than full maneuvering capability in open water. The options existed. They were constrained. At 6:44, the Type 055 had closed to 18 nautical miles and had adjusted its heading to 172 degrees, a modification that placed it on a track converging with the Antietam's projected position in approximately 14 minutes. The traffic picture around the Antietam at that moment included the bulk carrier ahead at 2 miles, a slow-moving product tanker that had drifted partially across the lane boundary from the north, and 3 fishing vessels that had appeared from the direction of the Fujian coast and were operating in a loose cluster that the radar picture could not, at first pass, cleanly separate from the background clutter of the strait's shoaling margins. The fishing vessels were the complication. The Antietam's surface search radar was doing its job, but 3 small contacts at low speed and close proximity to each other and to shallow water clutter, in a strait that contains approximately 200 other vessels of varying sizes and headings, required the petty officer on the scope to allocate additional attention to classification at a moment when the Type 055 was also requiring attention. This is not a failure of the system. It is an accurate description of operating in the Taiwan Strait on a normal morning. There are a lot of things on the radar. The job is to track them all. For approximately 8 minutes, between 6:44 and 6:52, the tactical picture had 2 simultaneous priorities. The Type 055 at 18 nautical miles, closing rapidly, and 3 unclassified fishing contacts at 5 nautical miles in a position that complicated the Antietam's most direct course adjustment option. The watch section managed both. The TAO noted in his log at 6:48 that the fishing vessel classification was ongoing and that the Type 055 closure was being tracked continuously. He described the situation as manageable with attention. He meant it. It was also the 8 minutes where the geometry had the most variables, and the margin for misclassification of the fishing contacts would have been most consequential. The fishing vessels were eventually classified as commercial small craft by 6:52. Their radar cross-sections, speeds, and movement patterns were consistent with fishing operations and inconsistent with any other operational profile. The classification closed the second priority. The first priority remained on an 18-degree closing track and had now reached 11 nautical miles. At 6:53, the commanding officer of USS Antietam made a course adjustment to 025 degrees, a modest change justified by the traffic geometry ahead that simultaneously increased the lateral separation from the Type 055's projected track by approximately 3 nautical miles without constituting the kind of dramatic course reversal that could be characterized as yielding to the plan's approach. The course adjustment was logged as a traffic management decision. It was a traffic management decision. It also happened to be the geometrically correct response to the Type 055's approach, and the commanding officer had been thinking about it since 0619. 3 nautical miles of additional lateral separation at 11 nautical miles is not a comfortable margin. It is a workable one. The commanding officer had assessed it as workable. He was correct. Now, let us return to what the AN/SLQ-32 was doing during the entire period between 6:17 and 7:31, because this is the section of the morning that deserves the most careful attention and will receive the least coverage on Chinese state media. The Type 346B, active electronically scanned array radar, is the Type 055's primary sensor and fire control system. It is a multifunction radar capable of simultaneous search, track, and guidance functions across multiple targets. It is, by any honest assessment, a world-class system. The intelligence community has wanted a complete emission characterization of the Type 346b in operational mode. Specifically, in the mode configurations it uses when tracking a surface contact at engagement-relevant ranges, for approximately the duration of the Type 055's operational service life, which began in 2019. Previous collection had been partial, geometrically limited, or captured in test configurations that may not represent operational employment parameters. The Type 055's transit toward the Antietam, at 29 knots on a closing course, had produced 74 minutes of direct emission collection at ranges decreasing from 49 to 6 nautical miles. The SLQ-32 had captured the Type 346b across 7 distinct operational modes: long-range search, medium-range search, surface contact acquisition, surface contact tracking, the brief targeting activations at 0632, a fire control illumination mode that the Type 055 crew activated for 11 seconds at 7:09, which was logged immediately and flagged as Priority 1 collection, and the transition waveforms between each mode. The fire control illumination activation at 7:09 deserves specific attention. A fire control illumination radar is not a navigation system. It is not a search system. It is the mode that a radar enters when it is developing the precise targeting data needed to guide a weapon to a specific contact. Activating it in the direction of a U.S. Navy cruiser in the Taiwan Strait is a deliberate communication. The same communication that the Type 056A corvettes at USS Chancellorsville had attempted to make, resolved in 25 seconds when the Chancellorsville illuminated them back. The Antietam's response to the 11-second activation was documented, professional, and appropriately calibrated to the escalation level involved. More importantly for this story, the 11-second activation was the most complete direct collection of the Type 346b's fire control illumination mode, waveform that Pacific Fleet EW had produced since the system entered service. 11 seconds. The intelligence community had been working on this characterization for 4 years. The Type 055's commanding officer had provided it in 11 seconds of a demonstration maneuver. The SLQ-32 collected every microsecond. The intelligence warfare officer noted the activation in his log at 7:09 and 34 seconds. His annotation was 7 words: underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 4, underscore, underscore. He then transmitted the collection package to 7th Fleet on the priority distribution channel and returned to monitoring the ongoing collection as the Type 055 continued its transit. His supervisor, reading the annotation over his shoulder, said nothing for a moment. Quote, 5, quote, the supervisor said. Quote, 6, quote, the intelligence warfare officer said. He did not look up from his console. He was right. At 7:18, the Type 055 reached its closest point of approach, 5.8 nautical miles from the Antietam, off the cruiser's port quarter, matching speed at 26 knots in a parallel track that lasted approximately 11 minutes. During those 11 minutes, a petty officer on the Antietam's port bridge wing with a camera and long focal length lens documented the Type 055 in detail: hull configuration, antenna positions, visible equipment installations, and the weapons loadout visible on the vertical launch system deck plates. The photographs were taken with the methodical thoroughness of someone whose job includes documenting these things and who has done it before. The Type 055 is a large, distinctive warship. It photographs well. A quartermaster, who was also on the bridge wing, conducting a routine visual check of the navigation lights, glanced at the Type 05511 minutes of parallel track. He noted, in his personal log later that evening, that it was a big ship, that it looked new, and that its crew on the bridge wing appeared to be photographing the Antietam with similar equipment. He found this mutually appropriate. He completed his navigation light check and went inside. The coffee, he noted, was still bad. By 7:29, the Type 055 had begun a gradual course change to the west, increasing the separation from the Antietam and transitioning from parallel shadow to departure track. By 7:41, the contact was at 12 nautical miles and increasing. By 8:15, it had returned to its patrol sector northwest of the Strait center line. The Antietam continued on course 025, transiting northeast at 14 knots, unremarkable to any casual observer of the shipping lane picture who had not been following the radar track since 6:17. The intelligence package from the morning's collection was assembled by the intelligence warfare officer between 7:45 and 9:30. The preliminary report ran to 19 pages. The Type 346 B emission characterization occupied 11 of them, organized by mode, with waveform parameters, mode transition signatures, and the fire control illumination capture given its own subsection with a classification marking that indicated the distribution list extended to authorities not routinely included in surface ship intelligence reporting. The hull and equipment imagery from the bridge wing occupied 2 pages of the annex. The Type 055's course and speed data across the full encounter, cross-referenced against its emission mode transitions, occupied 3 pages of a behavior analysis section that attempted to correlate radar employment patterns with tactical decision points. The intelligence warfare officer submitted the report at 9:47. His covering note, which was not part of the official report but accompanied it through internal channels, contained one sentence. ___, quote, _7, ___. The recommendation was approved within 4 hours. The distribution went out before dinner. The money accountant of this encounter has the particular shape that Type 055 encounters always produce. The Type 055 Nanchang, the lead ship of its class, and the ship whose general profile and radar signature the Antietam had been tracking, cost the People's Republic of China approximately $900 million by the best available open-source estimates of Chinese naval procurement. The USS Antietam, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser commissioned in 1994, represents approximately $1 billion in 1990s procurement dollars, which translates to considerably more in current terms when you include 3 decades of upgrades, system replacements, and the continuous investment in the Aegis combat system that makes the ship relevant in the current decade. The 2 ships were, in platform terms, financial peers. What they were not peers in was collection infrastructure. The Antietam's SLQ-32, the Link 16 data link distribution, the intelligence warfare officer's analytical capacity, and the Pacific Fleet processing architecture behind all of it, represented an investment in intelligence collection capability that the Type 055's transit had just paid dividends on at no additional cost. The Type 055 had spent $900 million to conduct a presence demonstration. The presence demonstration had produced 19 pages of intelligence that the U.S. did not have before 6/17, and has had ever since. This is not a trade the Type 055 plan and staff had modeled in their 3 days of preparation. At approximately 1500 Beijing time, the People's Liberation Army Navy's official media account posted a brief statement confirming that a planned warship had conducted a patrol in the Taiwan Strait, asserting Chinese sovereignty over the waterway, and noting that planned forces remained prepared to respond to any provocative action by foreign military vessels. The statement included one photograph of the Type 055 underway, apparently taken from a Chinese helicopter or maritime patrol aircraft. The ship looked large and capable and modern in the photograph because it is all of those things. The statement did not mention the 74 minutes of Type 346B emission collection. It did not mention the fire control illumination activation and the 11-second complete waveform characterization. It did not mention the 19-page intelligence report. It did not mention that the Antietam had not altered its transit track in response to the Type 055's approach. The course adjustment to 025 degrees had been a traffic management decision, logged as such, and the Antietam reached its exit point from the strait at 14:22 on schedule. The Antietam's commanding officer submitted his after-action report at 11 o'clock. It was thorough and factual. The incident section was 3 paragraphs. The intelligence annex cross-reference was 1 sentence directing readers to the separate intelligence report. The administrative section noted the expenditure of 1 pot of coffee between 600 and 1000 and the need for a replacement filter element in the CIC coffee maker, which had been underperforming since Yokosuka. The commanding officer signed the report. The intelligence warfare officer signed his. The Type 346B fire control illumination characterization traveled through distribution channels that the Type 055's planning staff does not have visibility into. The next time a Type 055 activates its Type 346B in fire control illumination mode, in the presence of a U.S. Navy asset, the receiving system's threat library will already know exactly what it is seeing, exactly what mode it represents, and exactly what to do with that information. The Taiwan Strait is where it has always been. The Antietam's transit record shows a completed passage, course 025, 14 knots, no deviations from planned track. The Type 055 had come to demonstrate that planned forces could contest the strait. They can. They also, in the process of demonstrating it, contributed the most complete Type 346B fire control characterization that Pacific Fleet Intelligence had produced in 4 years of trying. Both things are true. Only one of them was in the plan's operational plan for the morning. Bye for now.